These stories came in on my Instagram, and I think it's really one of them is really a worthy discussion for us to have because it talks about vulnerability, and a lot of times we struggle with being vulnerable and we don't exactly know what it feels like. So I'm going to read the question, and then we are going to see what the delegation says about that. Hey, good sister, I listened to your sermon yesterday, the final product, and I gave myself to the Lord and asked him to get down in those hurt slash broken places. And today I feel it's hard to describe. It's more like vulnerable. I don't know. I have this tingly feeling in my chest. Am I doing this right? So I want to tell you, yes, you are doing this right. Vulnerability is when we take our walls down, when we allow ourselves to really, really feel and to face our pain and our brokenness. And for me, I hold that, decision, that openness, that awareness in my body. And it does make you feel really fragile. Part of the reason why we don't like being vulnerable is because we don't like that feeling of being fragile. But if we do not practice vulnerability at minimum with ourselves and in our relationship with God, then we will never fully know ourselves or fully experience God's presence in a way that transforms our lives. It is when God gets down into those feelings that you hold in your body, those emotions that you hold in your body, that you're able to really allow yourself to be open to his presence. So it's really laying yourself out. And what I have found to be so powerful is to worship from that place. So, like we can worship from this place of like, oh, God is so good. And like from this maybe religious even obligation of worship. But God wants that feeling that you get when you say, man, that really hurt me, beyond hurt me. It changed me. And I don't know who I am anymore. And I don't know if I can continue to live the way that I'm living. If you're maybe used to living with your walls up and used to not allowing yourself to feel, I want to challenge you to listen to that message that I preached on Thursday. It's called The Final Product. But vulnerability opens you up. Grief opens you up. And we get to choose whether or not we dive into those emotions to really sort them out and come to a place of peace, or whether we just bury them and pretend like they don't exist. When we end up burying them and pretending like we don't exist, pretending that they don't exist, we end up losing a part of ourselves that we ultimately need to be connected with God and to the world with those pieces of ourselves. So vulnerability is hard. And people tell me all the time, like, oh, you're so good at being vulnerable. And I don't know that I feel like I'm like good at being vulnerable. I just came to this place like after I went through my divorce where I was just like tired of pretending. Like I had to pretend in my adolescence and my teenage years and my young adult years. I had to pretend so much, pretend that I was okay after my teen pregnancy, pretend that I was okay being TD Jake's daughter even though I'd had these mistakes, pretending that I was okay dropping out of college, pretending that I was okay that I was in this toxic relationship, pretending that I was okay that I didn't know who I am and didn't know what my worth or value was. And I just got so tired of pretending, and I finally allowed myself to say I'm hurt and I'm angry and I'm upset and I feel like I have no worth and I feel like I have no value. And I had to really sit in that, because as much as I thought that I was doing a good job of pretending, that pain was showing up in my decision making. And when that pain shows up in your decision making, it changes how you show up in the world. And so I want to challenge you guys to face your emotions at any given time, right? Like, so sometimes when you end up living confined and restricted, you can have moments where you could really be experiencing joy and happiness, but because you don't allow yourself to feel, you don't get to feel anything at all, not even those moments where you have peace, where you have joy, where you look at your husband and you're like, man, I'm grateful for you. When you do silly things and you do, beautiful things for your friendships and your other relationships, because you are so present with yourself in the moment that you're in, that you get to express from the core of who you are and not from who life has made you become. So there are so many beautiful things about vulnerability, but you do have to risk feeling that like open, oh gosh, I could be broken, I'm fragile, I feel emotional, I feel sensitive, I want to be loved, I need a hug. Like, we don't want ourselves to be needy, right? But until we are willing to like really open ourselves up to how we feel, we can't even determine who should be in our life and what we really need from moment to moment. Because sometimes you think you need a drink, or you need to sleep with somebody. Because can we have a real conversation? Like, sometimes you think you need X, Y, and Z, but you don't really need that. You just want something to help you maintain the numbness that allows you to go through your life, when what you really need is to be open to feeling the pain and the discomfort and frustration that has been chasing you since life kept shifting and turning into something that you didn't enjoy. And until you turn around and say, I'm not running from life anymore, I'm running into life head first, and I want to know who I am, I want to know what these feelings and emotions are, then you're going to be on the outside looking in of your life. And sis, ain't nobody got time for that. Monica Dorsey says, yeah, you're really authentic and transparent, and it helps me embrace the unknown about my own career and life. I think that you guys help me with that. You guys help me to be authentic because you create an environment. But I do think there's something powerful about like creating your own environment, because what I have learned in creating my own environment of vulnerability is that when people come into my world, they have to live in that environment of truth and vulnerability. Like, I literally don't have friendships and relationships that cannot fit in that authenticity and vulnerability. I don't know how to pretend like it's okay. I don't know how to make it seem like it's cool when it's not. So like, I do have moments, even when, people ask me like, well, why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that? I'm like, because it didn't feel real to me. And if it doesn't feel real, then I can't do it. I have to make stuff feel real. When we first started doing these ads at the beginning of this podcast, it felt so, was it this beginning of this podcast or the season before that? I think it was season 5. Like, it felt so weird doing it the first season. And I was just like, man, I got to find a way to make this real for me, or I'm not going to do it at all. Let's name this podcast Find a Way to Make It Real. You got to find a way to make it real. Like, we're being quarantined, we're being isolated. It feels awkward. And this kind of has to do with my snack, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. But you got to find a way to make this thing real. You can't be so obsessed with the way things used to be that you're longing for it, or wondering when it's going to be over, that you're reaching towards something that hasn't happened. You got to find a way to make this real and to show up fully in this moment. But that's all right. Kim Johnson says, I'm so horrible with being transparent, working on it though. I think you have to be transparent with yourself. Transparency is not necessarily about letting other people in. It starts with being real with yourself, because when you lack transparency and authenticity, the first person you lie to is yourself. You say, I'm okay. You say, I didn't need that person anyway. You say, I'm going to be all right. Like, you say all of these things to yourself, and that's the first person you lie to. And then it's easier for you to lie to other people. But when you start to be truthful with yourself first about how you feel about what someone did to you, man, like, I can remember telling, oh, but he's a good person, oh, but he's going to do this and do that. But when you're honest with yourself, you start saying stuff like, no, that was messed up. Like, you got to tell yourself the truth, right? It doesn't mean that you have to necessarily make a decision based on your truth, but it's hard to hear the truth and not begin to make decisions. And so if you're struggling with transparency and authenticity, I want you guys to start being transparent and authentic with yourself first. Adrian says, you have mastered working in those ads. Man, it's been a struggle, but I tried to make it happen. Let's see. Amir says, sometimes being vulnerable is hard because I don't know if the brokenness can be fixed, so I just leave my issues alone. But I'm trying. The brokenness can be fixed. The brokenness will be fixed. The brokenness must be confronted, and it must be loved. You got to find a way to love your brokenness into wholeness, not condemning yourself because of what you've done, but to literally love yourself into wholeness. Tamika says, I started working on being transparent and recently reverted back, and I know I need to continue to work on it. Start with yourself first. I think you're being transparent even in this comment section to say that I started there, but I'm not there anymore. Tamika, I would, if I were you and I needed to work on getting back to that transparency, I would start to ask myself, when did that happen? Because most of the time when we stop being transparent and we stop being authentic, we end up telling ourselves, something happened to us, and we tell ourselves, I can't afford to be open anymore. I can't afford to be transparent anymore. You got to figure out what happened to you. Obviously, we got to have this BetterHelp sponsor, so there's an opportunity there for you to really dig in, but to really pinpoint, when did that change? Was it when I lost the job? Was it when we got into that argument? Was it when my mother said X, Y, and Z? When did I stop being transparent? When did I learn that it wasn't okay for me to be who I am? When did I learn that me being who I am could cause problems and issues? When did I start learning that it was easier to pretend? And I think if you can pinpoint that will help you to really start dealing with those emotions and feelings that created the wall that you're in.